bills, breaths, steps to the hospital, minutes until the market opens, and sometimes the seconds until the world you built on love, on faith, on foolish certainty falls through your fingers like dry sand. My name is Emma. The day the market crashed, I learned that everything can sound like breaking glass, even silence. My husband, Daniel, traded risk for a living. He used to say, "The market is a mirror. It shows you what you really are." And then it showed him a man who'd bet everything on the next sunrise. The sun still rose. He didn't. I don't talk about the end, not in detail, because grief is an old house with doors you open only when you must. I'll tell you only this. After we buried him, I lay awake nights listening to the pipes in our tiny kitchen tick with cooling metal. It sounded like a cheap clock. I tried to breathe in time with it, as if a rhythm could save me. As if a rhythm could pay a mortgage. As if a rhythm could raise a 3-year-old girl and teach her to sleep through a storm. Mia. Brown curls that haloed in summer light, a laugh that made strangers lift their heads like a song had just started. 3 years old and bossy, a queen of plastic teacups and mismatched socks. She would toddle up with a doctor's toy stethoscope and say, "You're okay, Mama," and it would be true for exactly 1 second. Then the fevers came. The unexplained bruises. The word nobody wants to learn how to pronounce under fluorescent lights. Cancer. Numbers again. Platelets, red cells, white cells. Numbers that should go up, numbers that must go down. The doctor spoke gently, the way you speak to someone balancing on the edge of a high place. They were kind, but kindness doesn't pay invoices. When the estimate came, it was typed in bold like a dare. $50,000. $50,000 to buy a longer road for my daughter. $50,000 to wrestle with fate and maybe win. I called my parents. My mother's voice was a prayer half swallowed. "We'll figure it out," she said. "We always do." But we both understood we never had to figure out something like this. It was my brother who said the thing that turned the world sideways. Michael has always loved certainty the way some men love fire, safely, behind glass, as a thing he controls. He ran my father's business with neat columns, numbers that obeyed. "Emma," he said, and paused long enough for me to hear the judgment forming. "Listen to me. She's not going to make it. Don't throw good money after bad." I forgot how to breathe for a whole heartbeat. "She is not a balance sheet," I said, but my voice came out dusty. He sighed, an accountant closing a book. "I'm sorry," he said, which was true and useless in the same breath. When people tell you death is a thief who steals in the night, believe them. But also know this, some losses happen in the daylight while you're holding a pen, signing a form, promising to be brave in the corner of a busy hallway that smells like sanitizer and hope. Some losses wear your mother's perfume because she held you so tightly you couldn't stand up when the doctor said the treatments wouldn't be enough. Some losses are your own brother's voice, saying the future is already decided. And then there was the final number, the day, the hour, the last kiss on a too warm forehead. A small hand that had always curled into mine going still as a winter pond. The world didn't end. The clock in our kitchen kept ticking. The market opened on time the next morning, green and red like Christmas lights for people who forgot how to love anything they couldn't price. I left my parents' house the week after the funeral. Not with anger, anger is fuel, and I had none. I left because every room had an echo only I could hear. My mother's cups, Michael's tidy shoes by the door, my father's framed certificates, all of it hummed with the sentence I couldn't forgive: "Don't waste the money." I took what I had, a second-hand car, 2 boxes of Mia's drawings, a cast-iron skillet, and a friend with a stubborn heart. Olivia met me at our high school bulletin board. She was the girl who turned ordinary days into campfires. You should know this about her. Olivia believes there's a doorway inside every crisis if you look long enough. She found me in a parking lot and handed me a thermos of soup. "You don't have to be fine," she said. "You just have to be here." The first night in my new place, one room over a laundromat, Olivia sat cross-legged on the floor and watched me fry onions until the air turned sweet. "You still cook like it's a love letter," she said. I shrugged. I didn't trust compliments yet. She took a photo of the pan with her phone. "Let's sell this," she decided. Not the pan. The feeling. People don't buy feelings, I said. They do if they come in a biodegradable container with a handwritten note. And that is how a widow with a broken map of the future starts a business. Not with a plan. With onions and a friend who refused to let grief be the only thing I served. We called it Mia's Table because it made me stand up straighter when I said it. We started with 4 dishes and a cheap website. I worked nights in the narrow kitchen, measuring salt by memory and stirring like prayer. Olivia did the part that felt like a foreign language, photos with soft light, captions that made a stranger's stomach ache in the kind way. We delivered in my beat-up car with the heater stuck on loud, laughing too hard at things only exhausted people find funny. The first order came from a nurse. She wrote, "Your soup tastes like someone remembered my name." I cried in the delivery lane and then apologized to the steering wheel. There are seasons to rebuilding nobody warns you about. Seasons when the universe sends small mercies like breadcrumbs. A neighbor leaves flowers at your door. A toddler you pass on the sidewalk hands you a sticker, and it sticks to your coat for 3 days, as if glue can conjure courage. A stranger emails to say your pie reminded her of a kitchen she hasn't seen in years. And then there are the hard seasons, when someone sends back a dish with a note about the spice being wrong, and you want to explain how grief lives in your measuring spoons, but you don't. You promise to do better. You do. Slowly, the orders grew. Slowly, my hands remembered they belonged to someone alive. We hired a part-time driver. We bought better containers. We learned which streets drink time in the afternoon and which ones spit it back at rush hour. I went to bed smelling like cinnamon and onions and something else I didn't want to name yet, something like hope. 2 years passed. 2 full years of stirring and lifting and laughing ghosts out of corners. I carried the business and it carried me. But you should understand, grief can teach you 2 languages at once. The language of anchoring home, recipe, Sunday mornings, and the language of risk, whispered at the edge of sleep. Daniel's world. The market. The mirror. The hum of numbers that once took everything from me. I told myself I only wanted to understand what had killed us. But curiosity wears shoes, it walks. At night, after washing the last pan, I'd sit with my laptop at the scarred table by the window and watch charts crawl across the screen. Not the way Daniel watched them, hungry and certain, but like a woman learning the weather of a coastline where she once drowned. I read everything. I watched lectures at 2 a.m. with my palms flat on the table to keep from reaching for the buy button. I mapped the story of companies, not their hype. I learned to love earnings calls the way sailors love lighthouses, practical light in a dark place. And when I finally opened a new account, I did it with a ritual. I put Mia's drawing of a crooked sun next to the keyboard. I wrote her name on a sticky note and pressed it to my wrist like a bandage. We do this carefully, I told the empty room. We do this slowly. We never borrow what we can't repay. I started small. Gains so modest they looked like rounding errors. Losses that felt like pinpricks instead of knives. I kept a rule, no hero trades. No bets that needed a miracle. Profit felt like a polite knock, not a parade. But if grief taught me anything, it's that quiet habits build tall things. The first time I made more in a week than we cleared in a month at Mia's Table, I didn't celebrate. I paid our supplier early. I gave our driver a raise. I bought a better oven and stood in front of it with Olivia and whispered, "We're building 2 futures at once." There is a kind of sunrise you only notice after a long winter, not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a steadiness in the light. That was the market that year. Not a rocket, a tide. Up and up with pauses, like a careful child climbing stairs. I never chased it. I let it carry me as far as my rules allowed. And then, because the world is a wheel, something wild happened. The positions I held turned into ladders. The ladders turned into floors. I stepped carefully, but each step held. Before I could frame the experience with a proper metaphor, I woke one morning and realized I was no longer poor. Not just okay, rich. And that word, the one that used to belong to Daniel and his friends with their fast laughter and faster cars, now sat on my own tongue like an unfamiliar fruit. I didn't bite. I placed it in a basket with the others and told myself wealth is a tool a woman can learn to wield with grace. I bought a building for Mia's Table, sunlight on every wall, Space to teach free classes on Saturday mornings for anyone who wanted to learn to cook cheap and well. I set up a scholarship in Mia's name for pediatric nurses who wanted to specialize in oncology. I kept investing with the caution of a woman who has nothing to prove and everything to lose. Some stories could end there. The arc would be neat. Widow loses everything, rebuilds, becomes generous and wealthy, credits love and onions. But life had been listening, and life does not care for neatness. The call came on a Tuesday. I was signing a delivery invoice. Olivia was arguing with a scale that always lied by half a pound. Emma? My mother's voice jagged. The kind of voice that crashes without warning. There's been an accident. Your father and I, she didn't finish. A stranger took the phone and used a tone they must teach you for this kind of thing. The road was slick. The truck didn't see them. There were numbers I could know, like speed and distance, but none of them mattered. When I reached the hospital, they were already past tense. Grief returns like a seasoned thief, straight to the drawer where you keep the good silver, no time wasted. I handled the arrangements, because doing is easier than feeling. I held my mother's perfume-heavy scarf and wondered how grief can smell like the first day of school. I stood beside my father's desk and placed my hand on the groove where his ring had worn the wood. In the quiet, I thought about Michael. Michael, who had not called me even once after Mia died. Michael, who read the world like a ledger and found my daughter an unwise line item. Michael, who now sat across from me at our parents' kitchen table with a face like unbaked clay, soft and collapsing. He tried to speak and failed. I waited, because some words rip their own exit wounds if you rush them. The business, he said finally, and stopped. His eyes were glassy in the pale light. I can't, he lifted his hands as if the air weighed more than he could hold. Then, whispering like a man telling you a sin, I started using. After. It helped. Until it didn't. In that moment, I learned a strange truth. Resentment is heavy, but it's also a shield. I felt mine slide, clatter to the floor, and roll under a cabinet like a coin. I was defenseless. So I did the only thing I could. I stood up and made coffee. His wife, Anna, came the next day. She stood in my doorway and held her own elbows like she might blow apart if she didn't. I know what he said to you, she began, voice cracking. If you slam the door, I will understand. But he's not sleeping. He's not eating. He won't go to work. I don't know who he is, and I'm running out of words to love him back. Sometimes the universe brings you the exact test you swore you already passed. I thought I knew forgiveness. I thought I had practiced it like a scale on the piano, exercise for a heart that wanted to be generous. I stood there with my hands clean and my jaw set and felt everything I had stacked so carefully tremble. Mia would have run to Anna, I thought. She would have offered a sticker, a hug, something sticky and miraculous. The thought had weight. It tipped the scale. Come in, I said. Here is another sentence that doesn't belong in tidy arcs. I paid for rehab. The good one. I hired a doctor who spoke to me like I was a partner in a complicated surgery. We made a plan with numbers, days, doses, check-ins, and then we put the numbers in the back seat and let compassion drive. I took over payroll at my father's business temporarily because the employees deserved stability while the roof shingles were flying. I watched Anna fall asleep on my couch with a magazine open in her lap and a tear drying on her shoulder. I wrote a note to Olivia that said only, "Keep the kitchen going. I'll be back when I'm back." She sent me a photo of a pie cooling on the sill, the caption. We got you. Care is not cinematic. It's repetitive and awkward and full of paperwork. It's waiting rooms that smell like old coffee and disinfectant and the residue of 1,000 whispered bargains. It's learning to leave your phone in your bag when someone finally tells the truth, so you don't break the spell with a buzz. It's long drives with the radio off because quiet is a blanket and you don't want to lose the warmth. Michael tried to quit. Then he failed. Then he tried again. The first time he fell, shame sat on his chest and dared him to breathe. I don't deserve, he started, and I cut him off before he could finish a sentence that would have to carry 1,000 pounds. You are my brother, I said. Deserving isn't the point. Once, in the middle of a long night, he whispered, I was cruel about Mia. Yes, I said, because truth is a kind of clean water. He stared at his hands. I thought certainty would save me. I was wrong. We were all wrong, I said quietly. Certainty is a window you clean instead of opening. Days became weeks. The business steadied under my hands like a skittish horse learning your scent. I added 2 new managers with calm eyes. I set boundaries like fence posts, clear, visible, strong. I learned that forgiveness has to live alongside accountability, or it becomes something flimsy and naive. On a gray morning that felt like it had been held underwater too long, Michael walked out of the clinic blinking like a man who hadn't met daylight in months. He was thinner. The lines on his face were carved deeper, as if honesty were a sculptor who worked for free. He came to my kitchen, my old kitchen, the one with the ticking pipes, and we made eggs quietly, each of us performing a ceremony we didn't know the rules to. After we ate, he reached into his pocket and slid something across the table. I knew the weight of it without looking. His 24-hour chip, then his 30-day, then his 60. Keep them, he said. When I want to fall, I'll remember that someone else is counting with me. We sat there a long time. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then reconsidered. I thought about numbers again, the ones that map the lives we think we deserve, the ones that scare us into smallness, the ones that save us when we start counting days instead of dollars. People like to end with weddings or babies or a speech in the rain. My ending is softer. It lives in quieter minutes. It looks like this. I stand in the kitchen of Mia's table, watching sunlight turn the soup to gold. We've just finished the free Saturday class. A teenager who burnt every onion for the first half hour finally found the heat and now stands straighter than she did when she walked in. Olivia leans against the doorway, teasing the driver about sports she doesn't watch. On the bulletin board, there's a photo of Mia tape-framed with pink paper. The crooked sun she drew still hangs beside it. The edges are curled. I like them that way. My phone buzzes. A message from Anna. He made his meeting. He said to tell you the coffee was terrible, but the honesty was hot. I smile and feel the feeling I used to be afraid to name, something like joy, but steadier, like a table that doesn't wobble anymore. I check the markets the way you check the weather. Curious, prepared, unafraid. Green. Red. Green again. Storms roll in. Storms roll out. My rules remain. Wealth has not made me bulletproof. It has made me responsible. Every dollar is a vote. I try to vote for the world I want, well-fed, well-tended, seen. In the quiet before the dinner rush, I sit with a pen and write the week's menu. I think about hooks, about stories that tug you forward by the sleeve. If you need a hook, let it be this. Every day, someone is counting. If you're counting bills, I know how heavy they feel. If you're counting breaths beside a hospital bed, I know how unfair the math gets. If you're counting days since your last drink, I am counting with you. And if you are counting the steps back to your own front door after losing everything you thought was home, I will put the porch light on. My daughter once told me with her little doctor's toy, "You're okay, Mama." I carry that diagnosis into rooms that smell like sugar and sorrow. I hang it above stovetops, over spreadsheets, across doorways where people come in with empty hands and leave carrying something warm. People ask me, sometimes in whispers, "How did you forgive him?" "Your brother." I tell them the truth. I didn't, and then I did, and then I had to do it again. Forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's the way you choose to walk. And when you forget how, someone you love will hand you a sticker, a chip, a note, a bowl of soup, something sticky and miraculous, and you'll remember. At night, when the street outside softens and the sign in our window hums its small blue song, I lock up and stand under the quiet. I say my names aloud like beads on a string: widow, mother, cook, investor, sister, friend. Each one is true. None of them is the whole story. The whole story is a table that kept growing until everyone had a place. If you came here looking for a moral, I'll give you mine. The market closes, love doesn't. The numbers matter. The rules matter. The food matters. But the thing that saved me was not a graph that finally turned up, or a dish that sold out, or even a bank account that learned new words like abundance. The thing that saved me was a decision I had to make over and over to answer the knock, open the door, and say, "Come in. Eat. Rest. Try again." I still talk to Daniel sometimes, when the night is kind and the air smells like rain. I tell him I learned the mirror's trick. It showed me what I really am. I hope he knows that the image kept changing, that I am allowed to be new. I still talk to Mia. I tell her about the people who say yes, and the ones who say no, and the ones who laugh at the wrong time, and the ones who cry in my doorway, and the ones who leave notes that smell like peppermint tea. I tell her that her son is still crooked and still perfect. I tell her that her name on the front window looks especially beautiful in late afternoon when the light leans. And you, I talk to you, wherever you're listening from. If you've lost something you thought you needed to stay alive, please hear me. You can put down the ledger. You can pick up the spoon. You can count breaths instead of bills until they weigh the same. You can build a table, small at first, and then bigger, and then wide enough to welcome home the brothers who forgot how to be kind, the sisters who forgot how to ask for help, the mothers who put their perfume aside and cried into their scarves, the daughters who loved you better than you knew how to love yourself. This is not a neat story, but it is mine. It is a story with a hook I carried like a lifeline through every chapter, a promise that felt like a hand in the dark. Every day, someone is counting. When you can't count alone, I'll count with you. When you can't carry it, we'll split the weight. When you finally set it down, we'll eat. And when you wake tomorrow to the soft tick of pipes, or the bright scream of a kettle, or the quiet hum of a sign that tells the night we are still open, you will know what I know now. The market closes. Love doesn't. The kitchen cools. The table waits. And somewhere, in the room just next to grief, a small sun that a child drew with too much yellow is still shining, crooked and perfect, on everything.